The following episode describes acts of violence, murder, and information on a missing persons case. Listener discretion is advised. It's late summer 1973 in Townsend, Massachusetts. September 9th was a Sunday. The new school year was only a few days underway in the small town in Middlesex County. The incessant barking of a dog in front of the home at 393 Main Street alarms neighbors nearby. That's Judith Vieweg's home, fourth grade teacher at Spalding Elementary School. Neighbors find it odd that her dog Emma is barking so much. It's a lot of noise for a Sunday morning. One neighbor called Judy's brother to let him know the dog was outside and the door to his sister's home was wide open. When Ernest Vieweg arrived at the home, he couldn't find his sister. He enlisted the help of neighbors to search for her. Judith's next-door neighbor suggested they search on wooded trails behind the home. Judy liked to take walks along the trails in the morning. Moments later, the neighbor would discover Judy's body, covered in rocks and branches. Judy had been stabbed multiple times in the chest and back. Her lungs and heart had been punctured. More than 50 years later, the murder of Judith Vieweg remains unsolved. Welcome back to Unsolved Worcester. I'm your host, Dan Yeager. We again return to 1973 to start today's episode with the unsolved murder of 31-year-old school teacher Judith Vieweg in Townsend. Then we will move forward 4 years to the same small town and the disappearance of 13-year-old Deborah Quimby in May 1977. Townsend, Massachusetts is a small town of less than 10,000 residents bordering New Hampshire. Townsend is part of Middlesex County, but it borders the Worcester County line, and the cases we explore today may be closely connected to other unsolved murders from the same area and during the same time period. Unsolved Worcester takes a deep dive every Tuesday into the unsolved murders and missing persons cases under investigation by the Worcester Police Department's Detective Unit, the Worcester County District Attorney's Office, and the Massachusetts State Police. Be sure to visit Unsolved Worcester on Facebook and Instagram and listen to all episodes for free at unsolvedworcester.com and on your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Check out the video for this episode with exclusive aerial views and more on the Unsolved Worcester YouTube page. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Judith Vieweg was born in 1942. About a half-hour south of Townsend in the town of Westminster. She was one of 5 children. Judy attended Gardner High School and graduated from Fitchburg State College in 1964. That same year, she started working at Spalding when she was just 22. Once she had saved up enough money, Judy moved to the neighborhood of West Townsend and into her single-family home on Main Street and Route 119 in 1970. Judy was a well-liked and admired young woman in Townsend. She was a fourth-grade art teacher at Spalding Memorial School and a very talented artist. She had artwork on display at the Fitchburg Art Museum and taught art classes there part-time too. She was the vice president of the town's Teachers Association. In 1973, Judy was 31 years old and single. She lived alone. Her life was dedicated to her art and the young children at Spalding. To this day, Judy is memorialized across social media and online community groups as a wonderful teacher, a caring adult, and a beautiful person. under the photo of a thank you card a former student received from Judy, posted on the Growing Up in Townsend MA Facebook community page. Judy was described as a dear neighbor and a friend to all, and the nicest teacher I ever had. We can only imagine the impact Judy's murder had on Townsend 50 years ago. As one former student said, her death rocked the town to its core. On Sunday morning, September 9th, 1973. According to reports, children that lived nearby rode their bikes over to Judy's home to pay her a visit. When they got to the house, they found the side door wide open, and when they entered, they couldn't find Judy, but all the lights in the house were left on. When Judy's neighbors called her brother Ernest to tell him his sister's dog Emma was outside barking hysterically, and that their children couldn't find Judy, Ernest quickly drove over to her house only to find things in disarray. Not only was Emma outside barking and the door to his sister's house wide open, but Judy's 1969 green Chevy Camaro was missing from the driveway. After neighbors rallied to search for Judy, one neighbor, Leroy Schofield, suggested they should look for her on the trails in the woods behind her house. Schofield said she liked to go walking there in the mornings. Soon after, at around 11:30 a.m., Schofield found Judy's body about 500 feet from her home. She was still fully clothed, wearing blue jeans and a jacket, her body wrapped up in blankets. Judy's killer had tried to hide her body, concealed by branches and brush and covered in large rocks. She had been stabbed multiple times through the chest and back, through her heart and her lungs. Police believe she was likely murdered hours earlier that same morning, between 5 and 6 a.m. The day after Judy was found, her Camaro was discovered by a gravel pit worker at a nearby landfill on Turnpike Road, about 1.5 miles from Judy's home on Main Street. The car was stuck in a ditch where septic waste was dumped. State police detectives arrived at the scene and dusted for fingerprints and took evidence to the state lab. Inside the car, they found Judy's purse with everything still inside. It appeared she hadn't been robbed, and the assumed actions by her killer to ditch the car and purse only raised more questions in the investigation into Judy's death. The evidence collected by the state police at Judy's home and from her vehicle didn't point to a possible suspect. Police believe that whoever killed Judy was someone strong enough to move her body off the trails in the woods and to place large stones over her. It's been theorized that Judy's killer was someone that knew the area well and may have even knew Judy's morning routine. The person that moved her car had likely planned to dump it in a ditch at the sand pit. When she died, Judith Vieweg left her parents, 4 siblings, a large family, and a town full of admirers. She is buried in Westminster at Woodside Cemetery. After her death in November 1974, the Townsend Public Library created the Judith Vieweg Memorial Art Collection in collaboration with Judy's colleagues at Spalding Elementary School. As we highlighted last week on Unsolved Worcester, just weeks after Judy was killed, 15 minutes south on Townsend in the city of Fitchburg, 2 20-year-old women, Joanne Muldoon and Deborah Johnson, were killed inside their apartment on September 30th, 1973. Like Judy, Joanne and Deborah were stabbed multiple times. There were theories of a possible serial killer at work in northern central Massachusetts, especially following 2 more murders of young women in the area, including 18-year-old Marcia Timon, whose body was found in a rest stop on Route 2 in Harvard in mid-October 1973. She had been stabbed 60 times. A 5th woman, 23-year-old Clara Provost, was found dead in her bed with her throat slit on January 7th, 1974. Her 3-year-old son was in bed with Clara and watched her get killed. In 2012, Ronald Dame was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for Clara's murder. Clara and Dame had dated briefly in 1973. Although 4 of the murder cases remain unsolved, it is unlikely all 5 of these cases are connected. But there is another unsolved case that is often connected to the 1973 murder of Judith Vieweg. Coming up, we return to Townsend and jump 4 years ahead to 1977 to look at the unsolved missing persons case of 13-year-old Deborah Quimby. It's the spring of 1977, and the unthinkable happens again in the small town of Townsend, Massachusetts. 13-year-old Deborah Quimby, an 8th grade student at North Middlesex Regional, disappeared on Tuesday, May 3rd, 1977. She was 5 feet 1 inch tall and about 115 pounds. Weeks after her disappearance, the Fitchburg Sentinel reported that she was mature-looking for her age, and later quoted the police as saying Debbie could pass for 17 years old. Debbie left her home on Smith Street on her brown 10-speed Takara bicycle. She was last seen heading west on Turnpike Road wearing a multicolored shirt, blue jeans, and her royal blue Pop Warner cheerleader jacket with the name Debbie printed on it. According to reports, Debbie left her parents a note saying she was heading to her grandparents' campsite on Vinton Pond Road on the other side of town. It's about a 35-minute bike ride between her home and the campsite. It's believed she left home around 4 p.m. Her note to her parents said she would call home when she arrived to her grandparents' cottage, but her parents never received a call. Same day, one of Debbie's classmates also received a note in her locker. Debbie's note reportedly asked her friend to meet her at her grandparents' campsite, and she provided a map and directions to get there. Another friend was riding her bike with Debbie when they left Debbie's home on Smith Street, but the friend turned around and went home when she and Debbie got past Spalding Elementary and stopped near Walker Pond on Turnpike Road. Debbie was on her own the rest of the way to the campsite. Her friend watched her ride up over a hill on Turnpike Road and out of sight. She was never seen or heard from again. Her bicycle has never been found. When she didn't show up at her grandparents' and her parents never received a call, they reported her missing, and a massive search was underway. Hundreds of people from Massachusetts and across the state line in New Hampshire searched for Debbie, but not a single piece of evidence was ever found. Debbie's parents theorized that their teenage daughter had made plans with someone they didn't know to meet up on the way to the campsite, but something awful happened along the way. She had been abducted, and likely by someone she knew. But there were no suspects, not a single shred of evidence to lead investigators in one direction or another. 2003, Townsend police received a pair of typewritten anonymous letters, one postmarked from Worcester and the other postmarked from Manchester in New Hampshire. The letters instructed police to search Walker Pond, and starting in June 2004, over the course of nearly 40 days, police drained and searched the pond and recovered parts of a bicycle and some clothing and other items, but none of them connected to Debbie's disappearance in any way. A third anonymous letter was received by Townsend police in 2010, but again led to nothing but dead ends. Thanks to the great work by Lori Lamoth and her story, The Girl Who Rode to Nowhere, there are a few connections that can be made between the murder of Judith Vieweg and the disappearance of Deborah Quimby. Although they happened 4 years apart, there are some chance connections between the cases. First, it is believed Debbie Quimby was one of Judith Vieweg's students at Spalding Memorial Elementary School. Second, Judy worked with Debbie's grandfather, the same grandfather Debbie told her parents she was going to visit. When Judy was the vice president of the Teachers Association, Debbie's grandfather, John Vern Quimby, was the association's treasurer. Judy and Vern Quimby taught together for 5 years at Spalding. Finally, the sand pit where Judy Vieweg's car was discovered in 1973 is only about 1,000 feet from Walker Pond, where the anonymous letters directed authorities to search for Debbie Quimby's body. Deborah Ann Quimby is listed among the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. If she is alive today, she would be nearly 60 years old. There is an age progression photo of Debbie on the NAM US site that we encourage our listeners to view. It's been 47 years and Debbie is still missing. Thank you for listening. I'm Dan Yeager. Don't miss another episode. Click the notification button to get alerts when new episodes of Unsolved Worcester drop. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating or clicking the like button on our YouTube videos. Anyone with information on the murder of Judith Vieweg or the disappearance of Deborah Quimby are asked to contact the Townsend Police Department at 978-597-2242. Come back next time for the final episode of Unsolved Worcester as we explore an active murder case out of Gardner and the mystery surrounding the whereabouts of a fugitive. Be sure to catch up on all previous episodes at unsolvedworcester.com. Special thanks to the Worcester Public Library, the Worcester Police Department, the City of Worcester, and our sponsors for making this possible. Season 7 of Unsolved Worcester wouldn't be possible without the generous contributions of our fundraising campaign donors, especially Marcia, Jason, and Nicole. Information on Maureen and Jennifer's case was gathered from multiple resources, including the Worcester Telegram and Gazette, the Boston Globe, the Lowell Sun, the Berkshire Eagle, CBS Boston, the Charlie Report, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, the Neshoba Valley Voice, the Nashua Telegraph, the Doe Network, the Resource Center for Cold Case Missing Children Cases, and more. We recommend to our listeners to check out both the Women Like Judy and Crime of the Truest Kind podcasts that provide even more details into the unsolved murder case of Judith Vieweg and the disappearance of Deborah Quimby. We also recommend reading Lori Lamoth's The Girl Who Rode to Nowhere at medium.com. The Unsolved Worcester podcast music is provided by Tom Lebelzik of the Worcester Jazz Collective. This episode is written and produced by Pat Sargent. Drone footage provided by Ron Scott at Chasing Daylight Studio. Videography and editing by Colin Turner. This program is supported in part by a grant from the Worcester Arts Council and the National Endowment for the Arts. To find out more about how National Endowment for the Arts grants impact individuals and communities, visit www.arts.gov.